Well, we might make a start. So good afternoon, and thank you very much to everyone for joining us for this webinar. So I will introduce Kirsty. Kirsty's name was presented to us by Glenys Grant, who's on the session this afternoon, because Glenys had heard Kirsty speak, I think, at a Rotary function. And she said this was exactly the sort of thing that would be of interest to our membership. So thank you very much. Really appreciate, as I say, the fact that you've been able to do it at such short notice. Normally, we've got a lead-up time of about 2 or 3 months as I work with speakers and so on, Kirsty, and we've just short-circuited all of that, and so that's been great. Your help in doing that's been good.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm here today to talk about dementia, and I do apologize straight off because I'm going to use this word a lot, and I know it's not a word that everyone's comfortable with. So I do apologize for that. I'm not embarrassed to use it a lot because I think it's something we need to talk about. But I do apologize if I make you feel uncomfortable. There will be some time at the end where we have question and answer, which I find is the most valuable time and an opportunity for us to share stories and to ask questions that have been pressing for a while, perhaps, that you haven't perhaps been brave enough to ask, even if you popped it in a chat. I'm sure Jeffrey could read it out if it was a private question. And just feel free to express how you feel. It's okay. I spent a lot of time talking to people who have cared for those living with dementia. And I also obviously speak to a lot of people living with dementia at all different stages. So I will use inclusive language as well. And I'm just going to assume that we all have it. So, and it can be quite fun and funny, but it's a way of saying that we understand, because sometimes we feel like we have it when we can't find our keys, or remember our children's name, or call the dog by our firstborn. So it's normal to feel that way, but hopefully after today we can sort of know the difference between forgetfulness and dementia. So my little bit of background about me: I'm a registered nurse by trade. I started this charity about 7 years ago. With my husband's support. I was tracking along rather well as a nurse and ready to run a 200-bed facility when I came across a Dementia Café. So I'm going to start on my little presentation, but I welcome you guys to put your hand up and interrupt me anytime. Okay, so I'm very, very relaxed in that area, and the reason I have these slides is so I don't go off track, and that's my biggest let down. I tend to waffle on a little bit. I'm going to jump straight into this slide because it sort of gives a very clear picture. It was done by Kate Swather, and as soon as I saw this picture, everything made sense to me, because dementia is the umbrella term for hundreds of different brain diseases, okay, or injuries or illnesses. And dementia originally was an adjective. It's become a noun now because we use it so often, but it defines a collection of symptoms. And so it can take several years to actually get a diagnosis, because it's really a process of elimination. So the largest dementia disease is Alzheimer's, and often people will get confused about the difference. So I guess I like to say, dementia is the fruit, whereas Alzheimer's is the apple. So it is very much an umbrella term. If anyone's experienced depression in this group, you will have had similar symptoms to Alzheimer's. And with the right treatment and the right support, we can actually come out of depression. And you will often hear some doctors say that it can be a depression, it's a curable dementia is depression, for example. So there's other areas that in our brains that affected, that creates a dementia symptom without having a diagnosis that's incurable, which is Alzheimer's. So that's the medical stuff. And I'll give you just a couple of photos of just what it looks like. So if you've got damage in some parts of the brain, the area that brain controls will affect the symptoms. Okay, so If the frontal lobe is affected, then you're going to have problems with thinking, behavior, and movement. But if the cerebellum is affected, your memory is probably going to be perfectly fine and your balance is off, but it will still be called dementia. So that might explain Parkinson's, although Parkinson's is on the side there. So, so that's a sort of the whole medical space I'm going to go with dementia, because a lot of what we're going to talk about today is the social aspect of dementia and how and what we do in that. That's a sort of a phenomena at the moment. A lot of things in the past when we hear about dementia is medical and clinical and aged care, and so I'm not going to touch on that. So this term, person living with dementia, it takes a little while to say, and as a nurse I think I like to do PLWD just to shorten it because I'm like that, but this is the correct term, and person with dementia is also helpful. And the reason it's labeled that way is because we put the person first. So it's trying to unpack the stigma around dementia. So the old words that we use would be dementia patient or dementia sufferer, demented, which is not a great word. So all of these stigmatizing and negative words we're trying to rule out completely. So if you're involved in the media or you write pieces, please consider that language. That makes a massive difference. It's not normal. Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. All these dementia diseases are not normal. Any disease that's happening in our brain, a lot of scientists believe it's our lifestyle and our choices and our environment that has changed the way our brain should be working. And for that reason, when I came across all this research, I got quite cranky because I thought this conversation was staying quite central to older people, and we weren't including younger people in this conversation. And that's because, and that's what made me frustrated, is because that's the generation that is going to make the biggest impact and the most change. So it's really, when I speak, I like to speak to all types of people, all ages, from all different backgrounds. Because there'll be some smart kid that's currently 10 years old who will be destigmatized about people with dementia and then create an idea that just is inclusive. He's not afraid, or she's not afraid. So that's the stigma is the area I'm really hoping to reduce. So like I said, I was quite happy tracking along as a nurse, supporting my family. I was always a frustrated nurse. I never quite found my space until I went traveling around the UK with my husband in 2015. And he's English, so we were sitting at his mum's breakfast table, and I came across this newspaper that said Dementia Café opens a garden. Now, I, as a nurse, only knew dementia in a locked environment. I didn't understand the cafe bit, and garden, I thought, it didn't click for me. So I'm quite a curious person. So I took him along. Wasn't very happy about that on our holiday, but needless to say, I managed to convince him it was the right thing to do. And together we went to this cafe. Now, what I saw was something like this. It was so impressive. I was so impressed with what this looks very normal to any social community group that I've ever seen. It doesn't look invasive or medically driven, clinical. There's no one asking questions which feel uncomfortable. There's no waiting room. Great tablecloths, and there's even some icebreakers on there with old games and things. Everyone's talking. Look, Chris, my husband, said we're in the wrong place. This has got nothing to do with dementia. But what you're seeing there is this was taken a couple of years later. But there was this 40 couples registered at this Dementia Café and 20 volunteers. That's a 1-to-2 ratio for every person. Every 2 people living with dementia has 1 volunteer. But these volunteers are the community groups. They're the village. They're the people they've known their whole lives. They've played games with, they've gone to, bowls or golf. been in committees with them, you know, they've known them forever. And then, so this is not an unusual thing, but with dementia, we don't do that. We sort of hide. So I was really shocked at how easy this looked. I immediately wanted to know who was in charge, and it was one of these volunteers in the room. And there was no doctor, no council person, no nurse. There was just a bunch of people that got together for once a week for 2 hours. All the coffee was served with $1 donation, so really simple. About 11 o'clock, you start to see it reduce in size because the carers, people in the caring role, were squirreled off, I guess, or carved out a room for them just to come together and talk to each other in a peer support group environment. And it's a similar model as your Alcohol Anonymous kind of stuff, where it's you come up with solutions together. So it's very independent. When these guys left, they went out those back doors, those big white doors off to the right there, and they filtered down the high street, and they went into all the different shops in that street because their cars are parked there, and that's England. But every time they went into a shop, they were greeted by somebody who knew their first name, and they knew what they wanted, regardless of whether they had dementia or not. And if they did have dementia, then their partner could go to another shop knowing that they were perfectly safe in say, the chemist or a clothes shop or wherever they were. So that was a efficiency, I guess, between the couple. But the people who own these businesses put on extra staff for this every Friday morning. So I saw a microeconomy, and that was working and growing based on this one group. It was just extraordinary. I was so shocked. I came back to Australia thinking, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I want to be a part of this. When I came back to Australia, they didn't have anything like this. Not the village model, not what I had seen, not that community spirited business arrangement or, you know, organized stuff. It was really government funded concepts, or it was a sales funnel into something else. So I got quite cranky, and I said to my family and friends, I think I'd like to have a go at doing one, just not for fun. I probably did say it was for fun. It was literally the hardest thing I ever did, trying to find people in the community living with dementia to come together for a cup of coffee. But once I did, it was so powerful and so impactful that we wanted to continue to do it. Bear in mind, I was working pretty hard at the time as a nurse. I thought, well, why not? So I decided to do one every month for a year to see how I felt at the end if I wanted to do this ongoing. And that was the catalyst to starting a charity. It was very, very powerful. But in that time, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, but in that time, I spent every waking moment researching dementia cafes in Australia and the world. And the difference between the dementia cafes in Australia and the world were really powerful. Particularly the world ones were European based. They were community centered, village model, local, like community development, asset based is the technical term, that they use your resources locally within a square foot, you know, a square mile, for example. You know, that's what sustained the cafe. In Australia, our cafes were sustained by government funding. So the moment that government policies changed, the cafes changed. And that's another area that upset me a little bit. I ended up finding the guy that invented Dementia Cafés, and his name was Dr. Pierre Mason. Now he is a Dutch fellow, and I'm a psychiatrist in Leiden University in just outside of Amsterdam. And he said the Alzheimer's cafes is an informal way to make contact with each other to receive a consultation and feel at home. In the Netherlands, patients feel they have a place to just be. This is the patient and their families don't have to deny or avoid the illness. And over a cup of coffee, that works incredibly well. You don't have 10 minutes to hand it over. You have 2 hours. And you have attachment happens in that time as well. So when he said connection is the solution, socializing is the solution for isolation for people living with dementia. And of course, even in the 90s, that was laughed at. But he pushed and pushed until it became so popular that most countries in Europe have picked it up, and there's thousands of these all over the place. We just do it a little bit different in Australia, but I'm hoping that we can change that through what I do. So what we created a charity, Chris, my husband is an actuary, so he's very smart when it comes to legal structures, I suppose, or logic and rationale. You probably tell that I'm not that person, so we're a perfect one. And together we established this community-centered, inclusive, peer support social group called Dementia Cafés. And this is not an easy thing to do in a charity. We found something called a health promotion charity, which was only come about in 2016. And then from that, we chucked in the wellness element. So we are a type 1 charity. Not knowing what we could do with that, we decided that we'd just shoot for the stars. And as this thing develops, we would have, a bit more freedom, width and breadth to develop, not knowing where we were going to go. So it took a year to pull that together. This is what it looks like today. Not too dissimilar to what you saw in England, I'm proud to say. But we do things that we do every day of our lives. It's not prescribed by a grant, or it's not dictated by a professional body. This is a group of people who come together and have a bit of fun. And that day, I can see in the background, Harry and Megan, that must have been their wedding. That's hilarious. The boys here around the car, one of the chaps there was used to work for Stillwell Motors, one of the original mechanics. And so when he found out somebody had one of these Austin Healey's, we had a classic car day, and they stood there looking at that thing for an hour. That photo didn't change for an hour, and we were having a bit of a giggle, laughing at those windows at the back there, because what we do is we find things that bring you alive and make you sense of belonging, and that's the program. So it is really powerful. That sense of attachment happens very quickly because you can relate to people. Oops, I might just go back. And every fortnight we do this, every 2 hours, and we have a facilitator that runs it. And we hire people, really talented people, to do that. So the people we look after, the people we support, who connect with us, are just diagnosed. They're early stages, right up to the point where they physically cannot be there, or medically or clinically cannot be there. And people are in our cafes for 5 years, socializing. So our life with a lot of our members has been through COVID, because the attachment is so strong that we didn't disconnect in that time. And also a lot of all of our volunteers were within a 5-kilometer radius. If anyone lives in Melbourne and knew what that was like, lockdown, right? So all the volunteers, being a nurse, I put in a schedule and a routine for everybody to visit. We called them fence visits. And we converted one of our grants to be a food delivery service. And while we were in people's homes, dressed up in plastic, we fixed their computers. And then everybody got onto Zoom. It was tough, as you all know, to learn to socialize that way, but no one was left behind. And that was our motto. So this is what's happened in 7 years. This was not by design. This was something that opportunities came up and we just took them. The first cafe we did was in Blackburn, and that's my hometown. It's 2 kilometers down the road, and it's close to my kids' school. And so I could get volunteers quickly. I haven't talked about the kids because there's been many kids come through our cafes, but I will in a moment. Blackburn North is a kilometre away from Blackburn, And they had half a dozen people that didn't want to leave their community, who had been with them for 40 years. So we just established a little group there. And then with that experience, I then applied for a couple of grants. So if I can do it twice, then maybe I can do it 3 times. Then Box Hill come into play, and that's probably 7 kilometers away from where we are. And therein lied a model that we needed to document and repeat. And I did it a 4th time in Rosebud, and that's 100 kilometers away. So all of this little testing that I'm doing, and what do we need? What are the pieces that we need to make this work? Is my, is these experience in Blackburn unique? And I wanted to disprove that. I wanted this to be something that could be done anywhere. The last one in Sorrento, again, was, well, if Rosebud has one, then we can have one too. So, and Sorrento is a very wealthy area of Victoria. And so we just put the call out and said, if anyone would like to support us set this up, we'd have to employ someone, because it's a very long way from where I live. If you could, help us raise money. And that's what happens. They raised over $20,000, which supports both of those cafes. So it has been quite a journey. And this last 12 months, we're going to stop at 5, and we're going to use these 5 to help other people set up their own Dementia Cafe. So I'll talk more about that in a second. So this is sort of what it looks like. Those numbers are a year old. So you could put the 6 where the 5 is, 664, be something like that. We've supported over 400 people. Volunteers is about the same. We don't lose volunteers. We've kept the same ones that we've had for 7 years. Online cafes, that's a massive achievement for us. That was 1 hour every week. And if you didn't come to a Zoom cafe, somebody was probably going to knock on your door within an hour to see if you're okay. And we have a lot of community partners making this work. There's still must be close to 50, that one. I must update that slide. I do apologize. So here's some clips, I guess, from around our different cafes. And I look at these photos, I can't help but feel so warm-hearted. You can see they're having fun and they're doing nostalgic things. The connection is real, the laughter is there, and we just have a good laugh, to be honest. And we're sharing what we did in the last couple of weeks, not too dissimilar to what you guys do when you're together. It's just in a different context. So I will have one, if I can. What time have we got? Because I can prattle on. The one in the middle here, Peter is here, is playing a game with Augustine, actually. That Peter lives with Tourette's. That was part of his symptoms that he got when he was diagnosed with Lewy bodies. And so when he came into the cafe, he would swear very quickly, and you weren't sure what he was saying, thankfully. And we have a lot of children come through the cafe. We've had over 350 children come through the cafe, and they act as volunteers. It's the primary school next door to the Blackburn Cafe, which is relatively easy to organise because my kids go to that school. But the children learn that they don't see dementia, they see the person. And even you have some people say, when do the people with dementia arrive? And they're already here. Oh my gosh, I didn't realise. So it was like they just feel so normal. Of course. But the media has just signaled a whole different image for young people on what is dementia. So it just made me more proactive to unpack that and to change it. So the week earlier, Peter was involved with a quiz. We had a quiz show, and we had they don't mind me saying, but Kerry Young was part of our group for 5 years, and he was a world champion Sailor Century quiz champion. So there's a song that came on during that quiz. It was Strawberry Fields Forever by the Beatles was one of the questions about their song. And Peter's Tourette's stopped immediately, and he sang. So a lot of you probably won't be surprised to hear that music has such a huge impact on our brains. But he didn't just stop singing. He didn't just sing, but when the music stopped, he talked as if he had before he was diagnosed with his Lewy bodies. which was quite an incredible wake up for everybody in the room. So the following week, we brought in this music and I connected the headphones to the one iPad. So they both were listening to the same song. And they immediately connected with each other and communicated through their eyes and their song and looking around the room and nodding and gesturing. And Peter grabbed these memory cards here and started playing with Augustine. And he got all of them correct. And so Augustine had no idea that he had dementia. And he was learning how to play this game and was quite interested in the pictures because they're old 1950s memory card games. And Peter immediately became the teacher in that relationship, and Augustine was the student. So the sense of belonging and identity and ownership was all present in that place. And his wife cried, and all the volunteers cried, and it was like, that's what we do. That's exactly what we do. And that's why all these different activities are so varied, but have so much meaning. Teaching that has been my biggest journey. That has been very hard to show people or to acknowledge within all of us in this group here, what is it about you that brings you to yourself, brings you alive? What is it? What song is it? What activity? What happens when you put your hands in soil? Because that's the bit that we need to know. And if you had no logic in your life and no rationale, what's left? And, immediately we think, oh God, shame and fear sets in. And, what does that look like? Who am I in this world if I don't have logic and I don't have a memory? And that's a really powerful question. And it's something we should all really be aware of, because we have a deep sense of love, connection that we don't always talk about. And when we become older, they are the most important bits, the tactility and the sounds around us. And when we know that stuff, people can connect with us. The connection still happens. So grandchildren, children, friends, anybody can still find that connection with you through a tactile or a sensory activity. And from that comes storytelling. And from that comes a sense of belonging. And we never, ever, ever lose our ability to feel with dementia. It's not that it might change our perception and the way we express ourselves, but the ability to love and to be loved doesn't leave us. The skill is finding out what that is. And that's the journey. All righty. Now that that's recorded, Jeffrey, we can take that, write that down. I don't think I've said it that clearly for a long time. So our next steps, this year we changed our strategy. We're going to look at these 5 cafes. We're going to pull them apart and make them really strong. Then we're going to use them as partnership. We're going to use them as templates and partner and co-design with people to create their own dementia cafes. And then our last trick is to pull us all together and talk to each other. How we do that, it's obviously expensive, but this is just this weekend, we're starting a pilot fundraising program that allows people to fundraise all over the country. And it's called Dance Against Dementia. So it's a dancing fundraising activity, and it includes everybody in the community to do it, which is what we do. So I've only got a couple of slides to go, so I'm going to pull it together with the last 2, and I'll talk about Dance Against Dementia in a sec. But if you want to connect with us, there is lots of ways to do it. And obviously on the website is one of them, and social media is another. We also stay sustainable through selling stuff, which is great. And we also have information, but our newsletter is pretty famous. So that's amazing. If you want those things, just let me know. So we decided to start something called, there's all our Facebook links. So Dance Against Dementia, I'm not plugging anything here, but what I'm saying is that we've found a way to allow people, to empower people to find the funding they need to set up their own dementia cafe in a way that makes sense. And dancing and fundraising is as old as you can get when it comes to bringing joy and awareness under one umbrella. So we're doing that in 2 days' time. It's the first time I've ever done it, never fundraised or even done an event ever in my life, but I have the most amazing team that tell me to keep going. The idea, if the idea is right, it's possible, right? Just got to say it enough to yourself that we can do this. Although there has been times where I've been utterly downtrodden and told myself I'm completely deluded that I could pull this off. But just this afternoon, we have a full house. So we're completely sold out. So it's quite marvelous. And we'll be welcoming 150 fundraisers on Saturday. And they're going to dance for 4 hours straight. And they're going to send their fundraising page out to all their friends and family to donate to them. And that way we can start to build more cafes around the country. So it's big and it's fun, and have all different age groups. We have the youngest is 4 and the oldest is 95. And with this fundraising idea, we use all the music right across the last 80 since 1940s to today. So yeah, perhaps I should talk to you guys another time to see how it went. It could be a complete disaster. I dare say we're going to have walkouts when the 60s start, and a whole new group coming in when the 90s start kicking off. But you know, that's it for me. Of course, I can talk about all these different areas. I've touched on the kids and what happened during COVID and how we're funded and what the cafes look like and what it means for yourself personally. I'd really love to hear from you all and what you're thinking and feeling. So I wonder if it's possible to unmute you or unmute yourselves to ask me any questions.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. There's a amazing story of what you've achieved. And I certainly congratulate you on doing that and all that you've put together. I'm sure there'll be lots of comment and question, but let me ask one while people think about that. For people who come in to help you as volunteers, and you talked about those, that's probably a pretty scary sort of thing to step into that sort of space.
Yeah.
How do you resource, and what sort of resourcing do you provide for volunteers who are coming in to help you here?
Volunteers, the volunteers are generally probably attached already to the community house. We started our first one in a church, and so the most of the people were parishioners, and they were curious about what I was doing. The people that we started off with were my mum friends, so they were nervous. They really were, you know, and they had a guardedness about it to protect themselves. So I stood behind tables or focused on serving rather than talking. So yeah, I was aware that the stigma was there and there was a fear factor. When people started talking to people individually and they were connecting through like-mindedness, so like one guy brought a footy in and suddenly there was a football being kicked around the room, and the dementia like fear went away. And when that happens, I notice with my volunteers, they then become curious about what is dementia is usually the next question, and how can I support John rather than how can I support dementia. So over the years, a lot of our volunteer training has been in the empathy, sympathy space and connection and self-connection space rather than, doing a course in it. Although they're really helpful, definitely doing dementia. We use the University of Tasmania MOOC course that goes on for 8 weeks. That's a terrific entry into knowledge about dementia. But essentially what we've learned, that you guys have probably heard this before, if you know one person with dementia, you know one person with dementia. Because if we all have Alzheimer's, we're all going to have very, very different symptoms. We'll have memory loss, but our personalities are so different. We're like, our brains are like our fingerprints. So we will act very differently and we will be perceived very differently. And so the ability to connect with individuals is our key core training response. How we find volunteers is not hard. A lot of our volunteers need to be there for themselves. And I don't say that because they're disabled. I mean, because they're isolated and their partners have passed away and they need to give back to community, or they're highly skilled people who want to show impact, you know. So a lot of our volunteers, we might be doing the administration part of it, or the treasury part of it, or program delivery. So the ownership of the cafes becomes part of the volunteer, and our job is to facilitate that as an organization. That was the hard lesson to learn, to step back as a nurse and let people do their own cafe. So I say, Jeffrey, it hasn't been hard to get volunteers. And when I've got them, I can't let them go either. And I'm going to say I can't get rid of them because it's theirs. It's as much their social experience than it is the couples who come. And when people pass away, we all grieve together. We don't grieve individually. And because we've been open for a long time, the first lot of people with dementia, the first couples, they're all still connecting, and they still go out for coffee, and they call it the US Club. So the mourning period is not isolating either. Yeah.
Thank you. And Tom, I see you've got a question. If you could unmute yourself, and same with anyone else. If you've got a question, either just unmute yourself and wave, or put up the hand if you know how to do that. But Tom.
Thanks. I hope you can hear me. My computer sometimes goes funny. Good. There are quite a few things. First of all, my wife has dementia. I'm virtually a full-time carer. We use a cafe which is government sponsored, and the big advantage that has compared to what I'm hearing from you is that it's most of the day, or at least 10 o'clock till 3 p.m.
Oh, yes. Yep.
I got the impression that your volunteer cafes are only 2 hours, and people have just got together for the coffee and then off they go. Yeah. One of the things that might interest you, and I'm trying to work out how to make it a question, but I can't, so I'll make it a statement, is that dance therapy helped my wife a great deal. And we happen to live across the road from a dance school, so she could easily shuffle across to the school. The dancing consisted mainly of her waving her hands, but they were happy to be able to advertise that they've got a 70-year-old enrolled in their dance school. And it did strike me that you might want to get the dance schools involved in your dance for dementia. Yeah,
I would love that. And it's been a few dance schools that have put their hand up. I got 5 coming through the dance-a-thon, and they're showcasing their style of dancing, which attracted them a lot, because there's young people, there's people doing street dancing. Now, I know that wouldn't appeal to you guys, but they understand what dementia is because they're grandparents. So they were desperate to be a part of that, and to show the world that they really want something. They want to be part of this conversation. Our dementia cafes, I think we'd love to do them every week, and 2 hours every week would be ace. It just gets too expensive. So we do them fortnightly. If we do it less, once a month, most dementia cafes will do it monthly. The cafe, I think that you've got going for 6 or 8 hours, day therapy, it comes under that day therapy umbrella. And so there'll be a whole range of activities that she'll really enjoy. So I love those. They're fabulous. You get a really good facilitator. You could live there yourself. But they've been set up to give you a break and to have some independence away from each other, which is what happens our whole marriages. So we don't always in each other's pockets. So, but our dementia cafes are just social, hang out for a couple of hours. We have an extra element, a part of our dementia cafes that others don't have, which is a carer support group. And that is definitely run by volunteers, and it's not funded. It's just enabled by the group. So, and the volunteers have a step up essentially and act as a friend while their partner has left the room. So yeah, a little bit different. We haven't got any government. We deliberately don't go for government funding because of the policies when they change. We don't want to change our approach, but that we'll see how we go as we grow, and we'll learn through that what works and what doesn't work.
Okay, thanks. Others, Jim.
Thank you, Kirsty, for this. I imagine that many of the families that come, or the couples at least that come, have requests eventually for how the partner can be supported in these situations. And also today I was with a person who was saying she couldn't find, and her husband has dementia, she couldn't actually find a GP that understood some of the issues around dementia in treating her husband, and just how to relate to him. And do you find that, are you able to provide support of that kind, or resources for the people that you have coming to the cafes?
Yeah, that's very organic. That happens very naturally. I'm very proactive in regards to the GP concern. I always get a second opinion. If you're not happy with your GP, you need to move on. I mean, we're in this place now where you can shop around for GPs. I would say even 20 years ago, you'd stick with the same one you've had your whole life, and that's a family GP. I have been in many, many situations as a nurse where people have had misdiagnosed because they believed that their GP was saying the right thing, because they've known them their whole lives. Like, why would they be wrong? And if there's any concern or doubt, always get a second opinion. I'm saying that as a nurse, but as somebody who's cared for somebody, many, many people living with dementia, GPs know a lot about know a little bit about everything, and the specialties you really need to be referred into the specialty space. For what we do, we provide an opportunity for the carers to talk to each other about what's happening in their world, what physio they use, what GP they go to, what gerontologist, neurologist, any accidents they've had, physical, occupational therapist, as a raft of organizations as well, home care companies, aged care organizations, that they refer to each other. So the goal is that peer support element of sharing, and I call it positive gossiping. What I noticed in the UK, and it hasn't happened in our cafes yet because we're not big enough, but because this group is so big and they've been together 14 years now, if there was a negative point put through by a GP or a physio, 100 people would know about it by Friday. So if you're not good at what you do, you're going to be out of business very quickly. So I saw this consumer-driven care. I think the government was saying it was a specialist word, and I can't think of it right now. I thought, wow, they have a voice. And when they were all talking at the same time, people were listening and they were responding. So the cream came to the top because of this positive gossiping. And for that reason, we don't have guest speakers from aged care organizations come through our cafe, because it creates a bias, but reduces our integrity. But it also, we've inadvertently created a marketplace without really realizing what we've done. And so a lot of people, we have bouncers on our front door, which probably might surprise some of you. We have very smiley, friendly, lovely ladies that welcome people at the front door, but also check people's credentials, because there's a lot of opportunity for sales in that space. And we've seen it all. So we really encourage positive gossiping. From what I like to have with my staff, that we don't show bias. So we have our peak bodies that we always have information on where to get. We always encourage aged care, home care organizations, physios, memory clinics to put all of their brochures on our tables. So we have an information table, and that allows the people who come to peruse this table without any influence, I think. So they can follow that up themselves and then feed back to the group what their experiences are. So imagine if we could do that 1,000 times strong. Like, that voice would be huge. And things like the Royal Commission, you know, maybe not have been, should never have happened, all that stuff that we heard through that commission. So I think from us, we have to talk to each other about the services that we use, and the good and the bad and the ugly. So yeah, but it comes to services, we don't do specific referrals. We encourage the group to talk about it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Glenys.
Yes. Kirsty, I first heard about you years ago, and it was through an Order of Australia member, and he was a supporter to his wife who had dementia, and he was struggling until he found your cafe, and that was the one in Blackburn. He was a great advocate. He was absolutely singing your praises to the world, because he said he didn't feel alone anymore. And he felt so supported when he went there, and he was able to find out so much and get so much help from others that were there. And I just thought you'd like that feedback.
I love that. I know who you're talking about, and my heart just fills with pride that I'm so lucky to have met him. I think what I've noticed the most, anyone that's in a caring role, it's so busy and it's so much thinking every hour that you find yourself alone very quickly. And the thing is, you can't give it up because you've got a routine, and it's taken years to get that routine. And any tiny little changes to that routine can create a massive trigger. So I remember when I met him and his wife, and the opportunity to talk to other men who were in the caring role, and to be able to cry and laugh about the little things and the big things was so powerful. But he knew he could keep going, and that was going to be, this was the right place to be. And I find that so often in so many men and women that come through in the caring role, because you can't talk to your kids very easily, because the burden, you know, that they will pick up the burden, and they probably might even take over, or they'll, you know, it becomes invasive, and you don't want to worry them because they've got their own life. So you're suddenly in a social group where everybody's going through the same thing. Incredibly powerful. And his wife was having so much fun. She was the life of the party. He was so grateful that he could just have a break and watch her in the way he did when, you know, years and years ago. And they were husband and wife in that moment. Yes. So our Dementia Cafés look after both people. A lot of our funding in this country will separate you. You will go to either the carers group, or you'll go to the day therapy group, or you'll, you know, there's not a crossover where you can have a cuppa together. I am so delighted to hear that. Thanks, Glenys. I must connect with him, because I know he can't come through physical disability. So yeah, thank you for reminding me.
Okay.
Thank you. Gwyneth.
Kirsty, is the Graham volunteer in the YouTube, is that your pianist?
Yeah, that's great. Graham Morfitt. Graham has been a volunteer with us since 2018, maybe 2016, and very true. He wasn't supposed. It was funny that day. We were interviewing the children to see what they like living with, you know, working with people living with dementia, and he was playing in the background, so the cameraman got a hold of him. Graham is so isolated, you know. He just finds his purpose through this, through coming every week, and he's playing that piano when people walk in the door. So it's incredibly powerful. He stops playing at, you know, 10:30 and has a cup of coffee and tea for the next hour and a half laughing. But it's like a mascot kind of person. And what he said in the interview is, I don't kind of do that kind of stuff. That's not really me. It's often the sentence most people say when they come into Dementia Café, because they go, well, I don't want to wash dishes, or I don't want, but everyone that walks in there, we just find out what you're good at, and you just do that. That's what you do, because it's about connection. Graham he's a little bit famous for us. He was in the Herald Sun on the weekend as well. Yeah, I needed someone quickly to do some dancing with our dance coordinator who's running the fundraiser, and he came in his full suit and bow tie, and yeah, 87 he is. He's just an absolute champion. So yeah, he's a terrific bloke.
He has asked me to go along with him when I first met him, but I do a music exercise program myself on a Tuesday morning.
We have other cafes. We have Gwen. We can organize this. Now I know. See.
Well, I will watch the YouTube after this.
Please do. Please do.
See something coming up there. Glenys, would you like to say some formal words of thanks to our speaker, Kirsty? Thanks, Glenys.
Kirsty, thanks for sharing your wonderful vision with our members tonight. You've taken us on quite a journey, first seeing the village in UK and how they were looking after their residents with dementia, and also looking after their carers. So then coming home to Australia and setting up the charity, initially meeting once a month, as I understand it, in one cafe in Blackburn, and to now to have attained your goals of 5 cafes and about 300 people supported. It's just wonderful to me. It's a great thing you've done and you're doing. And the thing that I really think is important that you're also doing is bringing dementia out of the shadows into the community. That to me is just so important. People don't talk about it; they hide it in their families, and people are starting to accept it. And I think it's to do with the sort of thing you're doing. You know, it's received so much more acceptance in Blackburn. I know that because of the cafe, and people talk about it. Because I'm a Blackburn resident, I don't know about the other ones, but I know about Blackburn. So all I can say is thank you so much, and good luck with your dementia dance-a-thon on Saturday night. I don't think I'll be there. I've got a sore knee. But
Next time.
You're booked out, I believe. Yeah, that's wonderful. So thank you so much. Would you join with me in thanking Kirsty? Thank you.